Aloha once again. My name is David. Welcome back to the 7th Direction. That means we're focused on going straight into us. That 7th Direction as defined by Native American shamanism. That refers to all of the other directions we're familiar with: north, south, east, and west, up and down, and then the last one, straight into you. As we go in our 7th direction, what are we finding? And we're finding that things are blending together. It's very difficult to separate any aspect of ourselves truly from any other aspect of ourselves. That wholeness is what we're looking to cultivate within ourselves and bring out through our body with a sense of balance and with a sense of energy and with a sense of responsibility to all of the consequences of being an energetic being of light, making creation through the act of consciousness. Now, all of that being said, there are a few things you have to keep in mind. First, you will not get a clear view of truth from here. There is a reason that they call it the veil. As I referred to many episodes ago, mystics, people who have studied this area of self and universe, refer to the veil meaning something you can get glimpses of. You can see it, but you can't see it clearly and fully. That is intended in this place. However, the thickness of our veil at this time, the composition of it, has taken us quite far in most cases from the truth of ourselves. So, if you're feeling a little lost in the wilderness, it's okay. You have a reason to be. You're not trained. There's no education here that teaches you what you are. If you recall, I mentioned this happened for me way back when I started meditating, when I got that insight that color was the most important thing in the universe. And then I went to the library and I did my homework and I did my research, and I discovered that there were billions of people. There were at least well-known, very famous religious philosophies that were well connected with the idea that you were chakras and that you could see these things through meditation and so on, and that the practice of meditation is actually something that's quite familiar with many Eastern practitioners of various philosophies: Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism. All of the native focused, the natural world focused philosophies all talk a great deal about getting in your quiet space, meditating, and then in many cases, as I made a quick reference to earlier, you can alter your consciousness in such a way where you experience what is known as the shamanic spirit world, in which you can have experiences that are focused on natural forces, such as those of animals or those of trees, plants, even natural forces like wind and fire. You can occasionally have these experiences, and what you want to remember is that the human mind at this point is oriented towards symbols. So, for example, even though as Castaneda and the Yaqui sorcerers would see us, we are luminous eggs of light, we see bodies, because that's the experience that we're currently having with our symbolism. That does help explain sometimes why we might see angels in human form, why we might encounter animal spirits in familiar forms. It's because we as human beings like to do something called anthropomorphize. To anthropomorphize something means to give it human qualities, to give it aspects with which you are familiar. So we can look at the rock shape on Mars that looks like a face. And then, of course, when we get there with our rovers, it's not a face, but we can look at it from a distance and give it human qualities. The quote, man in the moon, is the same thing. It's just an orientation of craters and shadows that we see, and then we give that shape a human aspect because we're familiar with it. So we have to understand that we live in a world of symbolism, that nothing is really what it looks like, and that we will not be seeing the whole truth of the universe from our various perspectives. I mentioned the other day that we can go through and find valuable things within many of the philosophies that exist on Earth, and use those ideas, those things, to take us in the right direction. Nevertheless, this place really reflects that old Sufi story of the 7 wise blind men who were all touching the different parts of an elephant. The tail, the tusk, the ear. And so, of course, they were describing very different creatures, even though they were actually connected with different parts of the same animal. So unless you have 100% clarity, which I certainly cannot claim to have, then there are going to be things that you don't see. And if your clarity is significantly below half, think about looking through a dirty window. Think about being able to see, only 25% of a picture, or 10%, or 2% of a picture, and pretending that you understand the whole context. It's not going to happen. So keep in mind that anything that you hear from me, in a book, a tape, on video, or from anyone else, you have to put it through your internal filter. You have to take the responsibility on yourself to use your power of reason to put these pieces together, and to use your passion and your commitment to the idea that you are exactly the opposite of wasting time. You are not wasting time. You are fully empowered in bringing yourself out. Taking that kind of a serious attitude is really what's going to be required to get anywhere. You're going to have to fully untrain yourself. The very first page of my book, before it gets into discussing anything, is a quote from Yoda. And it says, you must unlearn what you have learned. And in the human case, just like with Luke Skywalker, relearning how to see that the Force applies to everything, you too must relearn seeing that the Force applies to everything and everyone. That's one of the reasons your plans don't, quote, go as expected. Because everyone here is in the same sandbox. We are all independent, creating machines, little bubbles of light contained in consciousness, and we have come to this place and we're interacting. And the rules that we share, like gravity and air and left and right, those commonly agreed upon rules, we are all engaged in reinforcing at every moment. Remember, I talked already about how we actually only exist in the now moment. We are never in the past. We are never in the future. We are only now. Eckhart Tolle wrote a whole series of books about how you can tremendously empower yourself and find a completely new point of view on the universe when you realize you are only in the now moment. And therefore, what you see is only a product of what you carry with you into that moment. your set of assumptions. Remember, I talked about as a part of the 4 agreements, one of our 7 agreements, we don't make assumptions, but at the same time I said you can't avoid making assumptions. Some of them are built in. What you're trying to do is be aware of the ones that you're making so that you can choose whether or not you want to follow them at any one time. That is true for all of your influences. Some of those agreements, however, are beyond your individual agreement with yourself. As a part of this whole context of life, we, all of us who have come down to have this experience, have made these agreements about what the, quote, rules will be here. That does not mean you cannot conceivably break those rules. As I've mentioned with Jesus or the Kahuna or many other miracle workers all throughout time, you can attain a tremendous level of mastery and control over your consciousness. And since your body is nothing but an extension of that consciousness, the ocean of you is consciousness and energy, this is a part of that. Therefore, you can conceivably extend, and other people have demonstrated you can extend, your mastery right down to over the physical body. Well, there's one very important implication that's contained in all of that. And that implication is you chose to come here. You understood the entire context of life here. Money, religion, violence, fear, everything. You understood the situation before you came. You made an agreement with yourself that you would come here, make good choices, and be the best soul that you could be for yourself, for all of those around you, and for the planet at large. Therefore, to complain about the context of this place, to claim that you are more comfortable in your meditations or not being here or whatever, you're completely missing your own point. You are so empowered as a soul, you would not be here if you didn't choose to be here. There's nobody to tell you to come here. There's no hierarchy. There's no instructional manual that you've been issued by someone else, the officer in charge that you have to follow. An immortal God spirit of consciousness wouldn't work like that. The immortal power is yours, it's choice. And it's right down through the physical. You can see the power of choice everywhere. But it extends back to your root as well. Every person who is here has specifically chosen to be here. That includes you. So find in your 7th direction that passion, that enthusiasm, that youthful exuberance that was the foundation of your coming here in the first place. Yes, you may have had karma from past lives, you may have had things to work out, but essentially you come here because you enjoy it. You want to work on yourself, you want to make a contribution to this place and to the grandness of the universe, and that is joy you can also find in your 7th direction. So keep going. It's worth it. I hope you're having a good day. We'll talk again soon. Aloha.